Hi, Eva here. Today we are going to paint an artichoke in watercolor. I hope you can follow along and have some fun with it.
Okay, so just the three primary colors, and before I start doing anything on my watercolor paper or other than lifting off the graphite, which I can still see, I have a whole bunch more. Oh, stop it! I'm going to take one of my brushes here, get it wet, and so my setup is like this. I'm left-handed, by the way. So I have my palette over on the left-hand side. That's where I have my brushes. And what I call this part here with the terry cloth and a bundle of the Vita paper towel. Viva, it's called. Viva. That's what I call my water control station. Very, very, very important in watercolor. It's the whole thing about watercolor is the control of the water on your paper and in your brush. So I'm going to get my puddles first. So I already spritzed them, so I'm going to go in and get some of my transparent yellow, and I'm going to put it out here. And I'm making a nice big puddle because I don't want to run out, and I can let it dry out here. And then just give it a little bit of a whiff of water and it's ready to go again. So there's no waste.
What size brush is that?
Oh, so this one is probably a number 8. But it doesn't matter if you have a number 10 or if you have a number 6 or a number 12. I just like to, for this part, I tend to like to use not like a huge brush because it takes a lot of pigment in this, and it's hard to get it off on a palette. So I usually use a little bit of a smaller one. Very often I'll also use my dagger brush for that. And then I go close to the hairs, and then I usually use my spray bottle and then kind of spray the hairs a little bit so I get that extra pigment out. Yeah, so I'm all about saving or being wise or frugal or whatever you want to call it with my pigment. I want the good stuff, but I'm not going to waste it. So I can do there a little bit more. And it's very important, come on, it's very important, this part that I'm doing right now. Might seem really tedious, but I mush. I call this mushing, not dog mushing. I'm just mushing my colors. And what I'm doing is I am making sure that all the pigment has been dissolved in the water. I don't want any little particles of pure pigment, and then go paint from here and then get a stripe, and I guarantee you that stripe's not going to be in a very convenient place. It's going to be a big headache, so I don't want it. And the other thing is it gives me a feel for the ratio of water to pigment. The more water you have, the lighter the color is going to dry on your watercolor paper, and the more intense pigment, the darker. The more water you have in, the faster it runs and spreads on your paper. The thicker it is, the more it kind of is slow and stays put. And in watercolor, as opposed to oil, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, this is going to be my dirty water now. So I try to stay in one container for my dirty water. And then you can see, so I swoosh it around, bang it a little bit against the bottom, and then I dry it on my paper towel until I feel that I got all the pigment out. And the yellow happens to be a staining color, so it might take several rinses. I do not want to have yellow on my brush when I go into my red or into my blue. When I go into my red, if I have yellow on, well, then I have orange. I don't have red. And if I go into the blue with the yellow on, I have green, and I don't have blue, and I don't want that. I want to control when I mix the colors, and it certainly shouldn't be in these here. I want to keep those clean. Whatever happens here, that's fine. Okay, so now that I feel secure that it's dry, not dry but clean, I go into my clean water, and then I need more water in my little things here just because it's so dry. And then I'm going to go into my red. I'm going to put a little bit of red out here. And again, do the exact same thing. I'm mushing and making sure that there's no undissolved pigment. And there we have it. Doing the same thing. Just do a little bit like that. And I'm starting out with pretty watered down colors because, in watercolor as opposed to oil and acrylic, we go from light to dark. And now we can get a little color theory in. I'm gonna rinse out my red brush. I already rinsed out my yellow, and we can just double check. Yes, red and yellow make orange indeed. The dirty water always has a story to tell. You can always see what's happening in your dirty water, and you'll know if it happens here when those colors mix, it's gonna happen here if they mix. So there's lots of little clues from the dirty water. So again, the red is another staining color. It's Quinacrodone red, which is my true red on my palette. I haven't found a better red for being not too pink, not too orangey. It looks a little pink when it's by itself, and the minute you put some pink next to it, you can see that it is pretty true red. I think this is good. Okay, so clean water. And I'm doing it again because I felt that was there. And then I'm gonna go with my French Ultramarine blue. Now the French Ultramarine blue is the one that's most likely to have gunk on it because it is a granulating color. It has bigger pigment particles, and so it granulates, gives you a little bit of texture. It's kind of like sand in a river. When it's flowing really fast, the sand flows with, and then when it hits like little quiet spots in the river, the sand slowly falls to the bottom, and that's what those pigment particles does on the paper, and that gives you a granular effect, which can be absolutely lovely.
Sorry, you turned it on for the camera.
Okay. So here, and I put that next to the yellow because we can let them say hello. Hello, hello. So here, I could, of course, mix myself one big puddle of green, but I wouldn't dream of it because then I get one green, very boring. I like to paint with colors mixing and mingling on my paper. All right, so now I have the blue in my brush here, and now I'm gonna rinse it out. And I have orange, right? So I have the two other primary colors. Watch what happens, folks. Mud. If we don't want it, we call it mud. If we wanted it, we call it neutral. See? Depends. We use a positive or negative word. And basically what we got here was kind of a burnt sienna, brownish color. So you can see, you can definitely make your own browns. That's not a problem. Brown and burnt sienna, which I have on here, I have burnt sienna on my palette because it's convenience colors, not because I can't mix it. It's just it's faster sometimes when I need it. All right, so now this is done. And now we're going to start painting. Hallelujah. We're just gonna do it like one of the little petals at a time. So what I'm going to do is, let's start on this little guy out here. He's a little bit not in focus. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to I'll take a bigger brush. I'm gonna take some clean water, and can you see how many times I go back to my towel? My water control station. I would never ever dream of going straight from here to my watercolor paper because look what's happening. There's going to be like a drop forming and it's going to fall somewhere where I don't want it, or there's going to be way too much water on my paper. So I go on my water control station and get those drop off that's going to mess me up. And you can also see I often will have some droplets on the handle of my brush. They also have a tendency to fall off right where I don't want them. So I often will go and just, if I see I have that, I just kind of dab them off there. Now I feel secure. And I'm gonna get a little bit more water on. And now I'm gonna go in with my damp brush and I'm just gently putting down a layer of water inside this one petal. Wherever I put the water, folks, the pigment's gonna go, whether I want it to or not. So put your water where you want your pigment to go, because it's gonna go there. So can you see where it's shiny? So I put water on in that little outer petal there. I don't know what you call it, petal or leaf. But anyway, and you can see I kept a little tiny distance to my pencil lines because the water does seep a little bit. And so if I put it all the way out to the pencil line, it would probably bleed through a little bit, and I don't want that. And then I'm gonna have a lot of fun. Before I have a lot of fun, I'm feeling I should probably put in just a little bit more water. I'm painting on 300 pounds, so my paper is a little bit more thirsty than 140 pound would be. And just want to make sure that I have enough. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to dip into somewhere here where the blue and the yellow mixed a little bit. Let's just do a little bit like that. And I just did it with my tip. And I'm just going to go there and take a little bit of that extra off. And then I'm going in here. And can you see how it stays put where it's meeting the dry paper, and it kind of moves up into the water? That's this little petal here is being painted wet into wet, it's called. It's when you wet the paper first and then you put the wet paint on. And that's usually how I start most of my paintings. I'm taking my time here, I'm just having too much fun. And now I'm just doctoring up the lines, making sure that everything goes all the way out to the line, and I go in and add a little bit more. Can you see how it's traveling up there? And I'm now I love to use gravity to do me a favor too. So I like to let it just kind of go up like that by itself. Maybe I'll do a little bit more there. And as long as it's this wet, I can go in, add more pigment, and I might actually go in. Why don't I rinse out my brush, dab, dab, clean water, dab, dab, and I'll take a hint of red on my tip, because I thought it could be kind of fun if I got a little bit of red on here. It's my artichoke, so I can do what I want. And I'm just gonna have them kind of mix there. And then before it mixes completely, because red and green, complementary colors, we already saw what's gonna happen, right? So I don't necessarily want it to look that brown there. So I'm gonna dip my tip, my clean tip, into a little bit of the yellow. And I'm gonna just kind of do like this. Clean it out. And now I can already feel it's beginning to dry. There, I like that, that's kind of fun. So there I have my first petal, and I have some color variations. It's kind of interesting to look at, because we have to remember this is a painting. People are going to look at it, and hopefully they're feeling, like it's interesting. So, and you can also see here how it's drying. Can you see I get that granulation from the French Ultramarine blue? That works perfect, right? Because these artichokes here, they have a little bit of texture on them. So. And I'm doing it a little bit more dramatic in color than with the red tip and stuff, but that's my choice. You don't have to do that. You can do whatever you want, but you can see here, red, blue, and yellow, the colors I have, and you can already see how you can get a lot of a variety, and then I can go in and darken later. But we're going to paint all the little petals. So now I can't paint this one, I can't paint this one, and I can't paint this one. Well, I could, but then they were going to bleed into the one I just painted. So I'm going to jump over on the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing. And this time I'm going to do it a little bit faster, and just put some water in. And if I don't talk quite as much, and I'm going to put a little bit. I'm going into that. Another thing. Who traveled into who? The yellow traveled into the blue. The yellow is a mover and shaker. The blue, he is just kind of conservative. He stays put where he is. Yeah, I find that fascinating to observe. So that's something that we have now learned. Yellow moves, the transparent yellow moves, the transparent blue not so much. The transparent yellow moves, the French Ultramarine blue not so much. And I'm going to use gravity a little bit there. And I might even go in and get a little bit more just blue in here, just to darken it. And I'm going to let it travel down. Whew, how fun is that? I'm letting the watercolors paint for me, so I don't have to work so hard. Okay, clean out a little bit. And then I'm just gonna go in with a damp brush because I feel I have enough. And here, I don't necessarily know what's going on down here, so I'll go in with a clean brush, damp, just damp, not wet. And I can kind of loose that edge a little bit, right? So that gives me more freedom later. If you don't have a hard edge, you can make it into anything. And then before things dry on me, I want to go up here and move that pigment up, and maybe I want to get a little bit of yellow in here, just for fun. A little bit in there. And rinse it out. Maybe I'll even put a little bit of red in. And you don't have to do all these little things if you don't want to, but I just couldn't help myself. A little bit in here. Because very often those tips are a little bit, you know, brownish and stuff. And here we are, and there's another little petal. I'm gonna leave it like that. Just clean up this edge, yeah. And pretty soon I should decide, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, where my light is coming from. Now I often like to use a little error, because you know I have a tendency to get confused in the middle of my painting and say, where did I decide again? So I think I'm going to put a little tiny pencil error up here. That's my light sources here, so that means I kind of imagine where the light would hit. So kind of more on this side, on the left side from me, and for you upside down, you know, would be on the right side. But so here is the side, all these sides of these little petals, they'll be hit by the light, and then the other side would be darker. And they're always darker down at the bottom, because then they kind of tuck in. And you can see that if you look at the artichoke. And now we don't have a good light source here because we're indoors and, you know, it's even light source. But if you kind of imagine a spotlight would hit it here, so you can kind of see that all the tips here would be hit by light. And then you can already see, you know, underneath there, whatever is tucked in, it's a little darker. So if you can get a little bit of that in already in the first go around, you're ahead of the game. But we can go in and afterwards we not only can, we will go in, and then we'll put more color on top of, we'll glaze on top of it to build up the color where we need more darkness. So go paint yourself some artichoke leaves or petals. Okay, so you can see I painted a couple more petals or leaves. When I eat them, I call them leaves, but they kind of feel like petals. They are, I guess they are kind of petals, right? Because artichokes is nothing but, it's a big thistle. And then, you know, if you don't eat it and you let it sit on the plant, eventually it'll get all these little purple spiky little like petals, like a cactus, or you know, it's like a thistle flower. So, all right, and here I go again with my little pencil thing, and of course I'm sure everything's dry before I do that. It's just, I don't know why. I just don't like to see pencil lines in my own finished watercolors. There's nothing wrong with seeing the pencil lines. I want you to know. There's many painters, that's actually their style. They like to see like the process or whatever. And I can enjoy it in other people's paintings, but not in my own. So, all right, so everything's dry, so I have a free pick of where I want to paint, but let's paint a big, nice big one so we can feel we're getting somewhere. I have my puddles, I'm good with that. I replenished my blue, I'm good with that. And now that I'm getting into a little bit of a bigger little petal, I will give, I went up to a little bit of a bigger brush. My philosophy is paint with as big a brush as you can and still get the job done. So don't fiddle around in big areas with little tiny brushes. It gives you more opportunity to have brush strokes where you don't really want to see them, and also misjudging the level of water and pigment on your brush versus what's on paper, and then you get these dreaded blooms, we call them. Blooms happen when you have a wet area like I have here. Can you see where I put the pigment? Not pigment. I put the water on, so it's shiny. And I'm now, again, I'm painting on 300 pounds, so I should probably let it sink in a little bit while I talk here. And then I'll put another layer on. The wetter my paper is, the faster the pigment runs and the more it spreads. And the drier the paper is, if you're doing it on dry, you'll see that later, then it stays exactly where you put it. But in this first go around, I want it wet into wet. I want the pigment to move and mingle on the paper. And that's how I get all these lovely color transitions. I'm not really doing that. I'm just accommodating with water so that the pigment can run by itself and do that for me. I'm a big fan of having the pigment do the work for me. So I dipped into my darker green area here with more blue in, and I went on my water control station, got that little bit of extra pigment and water off so it doesn't run away from me. And now I can go in here, and can you see, I usually just it's kind of like I'm testing it out by just tapping my little tip of my brush into, and then I judge how wet it is, how fast does it run, how much does it spread before I go in full. It's like I'm dipping my toes in the water to see how cold is it. And here I'm just seeing how wet is it, how much it's gonna run. And if I feel comfortable, I continue. And if I feel like, oops, ran too much, I go back on my water control station. And here actually I'm saying, not dark enough. Let's get a little bit more of thicker pigment. So if I go in this part of the puddle where there's more blue, and then see how I'm just then dabbing it in again, and see how it then spreads by itself, because I gave it the water to run in, so to speak. And then I can go right up to there, and I want it even darker here, because that way I can say that this is tucked in underneath there. Dark pushes back, light brings forward. And cool colors like blues, they also push back or go down, recede, whatever you want to call it, and warm and light colors bring forward. So I'm using that knowledge of color theory to aid in giving these petals some shape. And then can you see I'm just kind of dragging up a little bit of that dark, because I like to get that little bit of, there's sometimes a little bit of an indentation, or there's a little bit of a line sometimes on these artichokes. So if I do that now, I don't have to do it later. Dab, dab, dab. Now I put a little bit of more yellow on. And before it dries on me, now I gotta move it. Gotta get on it. And I pull that out. And my goal is to not see any brush strokes if I can help it. I want it nice and smooth and seamless. And I can only get that if I get in there while it's still wet, so it'll mix and mingle. Let's go in like here and here. You can see it's drying on me because it's not really moving much, but it's okay. And also, it'll be darker down here, and then it'll be lighter up here, because it's going away from the light. It's tucking in under some other petals. So basically, I'm getting light against dark, because the top of this petal that's outside is the top part of it's light, and then it's going above the petal that's the bottom of this other petal behind it, right? So you get light against dark, light against dark, light against dark, and that's how you build the volume on this artichoke. And so can you see how by putting, remember I dragged that up a little bit, see that already gives it kind of a little bit of that form. So I'm after as much form and shape as I can get with this first go around. The more I get done here, the less I have to go back and build it up and all that stuff. So let's do another one while you're here. Let's do this one, why not? Do the same old thing, a little bit of water, and I don't go all the way out. If some of you are having problems with it bleeding in, that's because you're not precise with your water application. You're going too far to the lines. And of course, you don't want to paint two petals next to each other if one is still wet, because they're going to run together. They're going to do it whether you want them to or not. It's not, you don't have a choice there. So paint next to a dry area if you don't want them to run together, and we don't really want them to run together. Can you see I put water in? Let's do the same thing. Let's go really dark here. Now I feel like a little bit more drama. So I want to get a little bit more of that blue on my brush, and then again, did you see that? I just dab in, and then I go out and I observe. How much is it running? And do I have too much on my brush? I'm borderline too much. So go on this water control zone, and then I can go back in again. And then I just carefully paint around that tip of that petal there, and it's not going nearly as dark as I wanted it, so I went back into the blue. And now I'm just depositing some more pigment into that wet area. And it spreads by itself. It's like magic. Dab, dab. So it's a matter of learning to let the water move the pigment for you. It does most of the job and most of the work if you let it. You got to accommodate that. All right, I'm feeling pretty good about this. A little bit dark up there. And see, I have a little time. Can you see how nice fussy lines I get there? And it moves, and I can have gravity do me a favor. Look at that. And see how it stays put. Where it hits dry, it stops. And so here, obviously, I wanted it to go all the way out here, so I'm just going to clean up that line a little bit. And now I want to rinse out my brush. Dab, 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 a little bit more, because now I want more yellow-green on this top, because I want sunshine here on my little artichoke. There we go. Nice and light up here. And let's fine tune that a little bit. And I could go in just to show you. Now I'm putting just a little tiny bit of blue on. And I'm just going down while it's still wet, so I know it's going to get kind of a fuzzy edge. So see how I got a little texture there? I like it.
That's nice.
If I like it, I leave it. And I just haven't had quite enough fun in there. Still wet, still damp. I can still go in. So now I cleaned out my brush and I put a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of the red on the tip there, just because I feel like, just doing that. And you don't have to do that, but it's just I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, looks good on there.
And I want it to be interesting. I'm not concerned about it being like completely correct. You can see mine's a lot, I'm being much brighter with those colors, but I'm not a big fan of brown, so. And it's my artichoke, I can do whatever I want.
You could paint it orange.
I could paint it orange if I wanted, or purple like Kathy's doing.
What's your style of painting called again? Is it?
It's more impressionistic, but yeah, colorful. Colorful is my painting style. So, do you want to see one more? I can do. So, could I do this one? Nope.
No.
Would touch there. Oops. So let's do this one. That would be, and then I can do this one and the stem. Maybe I should do the stem because I can't do that and the stem because they touch.
Right.
So let me do the stem. That is so much fun. Let's do it. So I am going to just put water in, and you remember how I lost, that's called, in fancy watercolor terms, it's called losing the edge. And I did that by putting a little bit of clean water for the wet pigment to dissipate into, so I don't have a hard line. That's when I haven't made up my mind yet. I lose the edge. Sometimes my mind, but mostly the edge.
Lose your mind with the edge.
Yes, I lose my mind with the edge. So now I'm just putting some water into the stem. Can you see that? And I actually went up here, and I think I might go up here. Why not? And now I'm going to do mainly the blue with a little bit of the yellow in, so it's going to be a blue-green here. That's kind of like the shadow side of the stem. So that'll be kind of dark. And I can go all the way up there, why not? There. Like that. And then I want to also have a little dark underneath here. on this side, dab in a little bit more. And now I'm not going to even rinse out my brush. Now I'm going to go into the more green part of my little puddle. So I have my puddle looking like this, right? So I'm kind of, see, that's why I love it like this. You do not see any green out of the tube on yours truly palette. She's not a fan. I can mix my own greens. And if I let them mix by themselves, by just allowing the blue and the yellow to mix, and not mix completely. I don't have, if I mix them like here, I had one boring green. No, that's not for me. No, I want to have yellow, I want to have the blue, and then I want to have where they mixed. And so I have all sorts of varieties of greens right here at my fingertips.
You have 2 colors on there.
Just those 2 colors, and I have a gazillion greens by doing that. So now I better get on it here. So there's some more green on, and it goes up like here. I want it darker here. So now I'm just dabbing in, and I want it kind of dark down here. Need to take some of all that moisture out. Going on my water control station, dabbing some more in. Put a little bit of the yellow in here too. There. See how nice and dark that is? And on purpose, I haven't touched this end yet. Because now I want to rinse out my brush. Dab, dab, dab. On the water control station, make sure it's semi-clean. And now I go into more of the yellow part. And then I'm going to go in and put a little sunshine on this stem. And I want it a little darker up underneath here, like that. And then, can you see here, I kind of like what's happened there. I wasn't paying attention, and in the meantime it painted. That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Watercolor. Put a little bit of the yellow in there just to give it a little sunshine. There. And then can you see here, I have what we call a hard edge. Can you see that? Because this was dry, and I don't necessarily want a hard edge there, so I'm going to have a clean, damp brush, just barely damp. I squeeze out most of the water. It's not really that clean, is it? It's more yellow, but I think I can get away with it. So it's just barely damp, and I'm going to go in from the dry side. I'm just trying to see if I can get just the tip of my brush into that area where the line is and get rid of it. There, gone. Bye-bye. And these stems, they do have a little, they have kind of like little ridges, seems like it, right? So this is still damp, at least, if not wet. So I could go in just again with a not very wet brush, and I'm just going into here, and just with my tip, I'm not loading up the whole brush, just getting a little bit of pigment, a little bit darker pigment on my tip here.
What size brush is that?
I don't know what this is, right? It doesn't really matter. I think this is probably a 12. And now, with just a flick of my wrist down here, I'm going to run in a little bit of that dark, and I'm getting braver by the minute. So I'm going to do some more. And now I want to have kind of more dark pigment on, and not too wet. And my pigment here is beginning to dry. Can you see how I can begin to get some of those lines in? Little hint of them at least. I mean, I don't have to do it. Now I'm going to go in and test something out. I'm dipping into a little bit of the red, actually, to darken, and then back into the blue here, making kind of a dark color. Because we already know that if we mix all 3 primary colors together, we get kind of muddy color. But I don't mind. Oh yes, now it shows up. Can you see? And it's still damp, so it kind of fusses out a little bit. So I don't get like really hard lines, which I don't really want. But I kind of feel like I want to get a little kind of feel of that texture. I love it. If I love it, I always tell myself, stop. There's nothing more, I mean, when you're having too much fun, you know, something's working for you, then sometimes you go overboard. And I have that little tiny bit of a petal here, and I just kind of want to get a little color on it. So I just got a little light green, and then I feel that it needs to be a little darker down here, and now this gonna work. Can see I'm just dabbing my brush in, and the water is transporting some of that dark color up, and then I'm going to leave the tip like that. Could more fun be had? I guess. Little tiny bit of red in there, just for fun.
Oh, that's cute.
So, there it is. So you have more petals to paint, I'm sure. There's a lot in this one here, but luckily it's kind of small areas. So and there's a lot of repetition because there's so many of the little petals. So I think it's a good one to learn on. And the shapes are similar, so it's not like super complicated as far as shapes go. But you know, it's a lot of losing the edge and have light against dark and all that stuff, having the colors mingle without having brush strokes show and without running back. Yeah, there's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of. All right, so we are going to wrap this little baby up. I finished my last little
Just me trying to get it.
leaf petals, and I want to show you how we can bring out some more depth by doing some more glazing over it and intensifying color. But before I start on that, Kathy gave me, she was going to do another artichoke, and so she's like, why is my color doing that? And then she handed it to me, and I took a one feel, and I'm like, oh, that's not arches, is it? And she said, no, it's not.
Instantly.
It's probably Strathmore, I think.
Yeah.
400. And can you see how that's how colors flow on that? Because it's wood pulp. You cannot, it's very difficult, I will say, to get very smooth. And try and show me the other artichoke you painted. So we can, yeah, and so beautiful. She painted this purple one. And you can see here, but that's also on that. So you did, it's not?
Arches.
Are you sure?
No, I'm not sure.
No, it's not arches. It's the same. So I am super impressed.
Yeah.
So it's not that you can't paint on it, but it's harder.
Yeah, it is.
It won't do quite as smooth here. Here you got it fairly smooth, and you worked with the texture you got. So I mean, it's just too,
This,
I just want to show you that it's not
It
just,
just drips like
it's just not something that I
It's smooth.
come up with and say that, you know, I don't have stock in arches or anything like that. It's just, it's a fact of life that cotton paper absorbs water and pigment completely different than wood pulp paper does.
What about, let's see, Fabriano Artistico?
If it's, I am familiar with Fabriano. Now, I can't remember if Artistico is the cotton or not, because Fabriano makes both kinds.
Oh, okay.
So I would have to feel it. I have painted on Fabriano. I have painted on almost all the more major brands of watercolor
Say
paper.
on the front when you buy it, it says.
Yeah, it says.
If it doesn't say cotton,
Then don't.
there is not cotton in it.
Right.
I can guarantee you that. And there are some papers where they have mixed the two and they've put maybe 20 or 25% cotton in, and they'll say it because it's more expensive. So if it doesn't say what it's made of, it'll say the pounds, it'll say 140 pound watercolor paper. And then if you're not familiar, I didn't know that either. I mean, it took me a long time to figure all these things out. That's why I tell you right up front, so you don't have to go 2-3 years and not understand why this works great and this doesn't, and you think it's the same, and it's not.
So is Arches 100%?
Cotton, yes. All right, so here we have another painting where we have a little bit of that bloom going on. So what happened was, you had this one painted, and apparently it wasn't completely dry. And then you went in and you wet this one, which touches it here. And since this one was not completely dry, this water rushed in like a tidal wave, and it could still move that pigment because it wasn't completely dry. And then this is what happens. We call them blooms or cauliflowers. And sometimes, you know, they're lovely. And sometimes they can be a problem. And then the next question is always, oh, can I fix it? Well, yes, I think we can. So it's pretty much just a damp brush, not dripping wet, and then very gently go in here and just kind of start moving a little bit here with the tip of your brush. Kind of see if you can loosen that hard edge we got there. There. And then we take a clean Kleenex and we dab it. We clean our brush, because the minute we start loosening colors and stuff, we'll have pigment on here. So you gotta clean your brush every time. And just have it damp. If you have it wet, water's gonna run all over and you make one little boo-boo into a huge boo-boo. So we can do it again. There. And then it's not nearly as visible. It's not completely gone, but that's not a problem. We can do the same thing as we have done. We'll do other places, and see here you also have, here you have not a bloom, but here you have a little bit of that pigment from this petal got painted over on top of this one, so we can just kind of take care of that with a little tiny bit of a damp brush and a little tickling, and then, you know, it's kind of gone. And then you can go in and paint on a second layer, and then let's take a little bit of a bigger brush. And I would put, again, now when you go in and do the second layer on anything that you have painted, very, very few brush strokes and very light touch. I'm just laying down some water on this petal here, like that. Can you kind of see? Okay, and then I go in with a transparent wash of that similar color, because I didn't really want to change the color, just want to make it a little darker down here, right? Because we don't have much dimension going on yet. And see how I'm just dabbing in with the tip, and I'm going out and I'm seeing how much it spreads, so I can judge. And then let's go up here, a little bit like there. And then I'm rinse that out, dab my brush here, and now I want to go into a more yellowy tone. And I can go up here now and make these go together like this and like this. And then I'm going to rinse out my brush, dab it a bunch of times, and I'm using a little bit of a bigger brush, and it's nice and soft. And then I go in kind of from this side and just make sure I lose this edge, because I don't want any more pigment on up here, because I want it light up there. And that way your bloom is, voila,
That's nice.
zagan,
Thank you so much.
sikan. There you go.
I'm fixing it.
So I have a little here where, you know, I have paint going over. So I'm going to do one of those little ones where just going to gently rub it. There, gone, more or less. There. Okay, and then if you have some of those little white sparkles, I usually take a little brush. Sometimes those little white, you know, areas where you kind of missed. See, there's one little sparkle, there's a couple there. First of all, I evaluate, are they in a good spot? Are they a benefit to the painting? If the answer is yes, I leave them, obviously. If the answer is no, they're detracting, I go in with just a damp brush and just barely, again, kind of tickle it, just so that it's not white anymore. And that's all I need. It doesn't need to be perfect, but then your eye goes to those little white sparkles. So if they're not helpful, you just want to take that whiteness away. So that I usually spend a little time in my paintings at the end of them, and take care of that. It's really not the time to do it now, but I want to show you all the different things that we can do. And then let me show you one more time, and I think I probably need a little bit more paint. So it took some more of the French ultramarine blue.
If you were doing this at home, about how long would this type of a painting take you to do?
Oh, it depends. I don't know. I mean, I never paint a painting just from start to finish, hardly ever, only if I do a YouTube video. So probably about, I don't know, 3 hours, something like that. 3-4 hours maybe for a little one like this. So now I'm doing that same thing again. I'm putting some clean water on with very, very gentle strokes, not scrubbing up and down. I do not want this pigment to reactivate. I want it to stay put. It's like let sleeping dogs lie.
If I saw that correctly, you didn't do the whole shape. You just
I didn't do just up there because then I don't want it darker up
so it
there.
doesn't travel.
I don't want it darker up there. So I'm just going to put some pigment on here, much darker. And see, it also gives you an opportunity if you had some little funky shapes. See how I can kind of fine tune that shape there while I'm at it. And I'm just again doing the same thing. I'm very gentle. I'm just barely touching in. And I'm depositing some of this darkness here. All right, because I want it darker down there. And then I'm going to go in with a clean brush and maybe have a little bit of a yellowy green on. And then I'm going to go in from this side here and then just get my tip into that pigment so that it can travel up. And then I'm going to rinse out my brush and just kind of drag some of that pigment up. I can drag it up there so that that continues. And just like this. And clean my brush. See how many times I clean my brush? Because, you know, once you drag the pigment up, you have pigment on your brush, and I don't want it to be darker up at the tip. I want that nice and light. And see there, I went into this one.
Was that primarily blue you put at the bottom?
At the bottom was a very dark green with lots of blue and not very much
I think that's what I'm afraid of.
yellow.
Yeah, me too. I'm afraid to put all that dark on.
So there. So see now how it's more dramatic?
Yeah, very nice.
And I can just see here, there's a little, can you see here? It's like there's a little ghost line. I don't like that. So I clean my brush, dab it, and I go in and just kind of take care of that so that it kind of is more gradual, so that's gone, no line. And I'm going to go in and put darkness on a lot of these here, just because it's going to make it more dramatic. So here I'm going to do a different method. It's a little bit more dangerous, but you know, I like to, I do it on dry paper. When you do it on dry paper, you got to be fast, folks, because otherwise you're going to get an outline. So I rinsed out my brush, and right away I go in with a wet brush and drag it out. Rinse my brush again, go in from the dry side, and now I start, you know, in from the dry side, and see how I'm going in here? And now I want to really rinse my brush out, because again, can you see here? If I left it like that, I'll get that ghost line. I don't want that. So I go in again, so you have to go quite a ways up, and here like this, and there we are. So I got it darker down there, and no lines. So, and it pushes it in more, gives it a little bit more drama. And so I'm going to do some more of those, and then I'm just going to show you, once we've done that, I'm going to put a background on. So I'm going to show you two variations of this. So here I'm going to do the one, I call it my chicken method. It's when I'm a little chicken and I'm not really confident. So I put a little water on, and then I have French ultramarine blue on this one here. And now I'm going to not rinse it out, just dip it into my red. And we know red and blue, they create purple. So, and a little bit more of the blue. And so now here I have to be a little careful, right? Because that's the edge of my artichoke. There we go. And I am not after the same color everywhere. I want them to be like a little mottled like that. Otherwise, I think it's extremely boring. That's just, you know, I'm not after a flat wash. I'm after a variegated wash like this, where I have purples, but they're not all the same. So I do that same method where I let the colors kind of bleed into each other. So like that. And then go up.
So you didn't put water all the way up to the edge, did you?
No, I did not. Because then again, it's going to run.
Right.
So I never go all the way up with my water when I do the water application. And see, because now I have it so soupy that I can go back in if I have some areas I don't really like. I can go back in. Here would be really nice if I get it really purple, because it's next to that yellow.
That looks nice.
Thank you.
As a background.
And so, so that's a nice kind of narrow area. And if you need a breather, because this is kind of, you know, you really got to be on it. There's no checking your text messages or answering the phone or anything when you're in the middle of this. Because if I wanted to just give myself a little space where I can kind of pick it up again, I just let out the color a little bit so I don't get a hard line, and then I can take a little breather. And you could do the same without putting any water on. Then you can put a little bit more water in your paints here, but you got to be faster. So let's see if I can do it. So here I'm doing it on dry. And sometimes it'll splatter a little bit. Did you see I got a little splatter in there? That doesn't really bother me. And I got another one here. If those things bother you, you can pick them up as you go. And again, there's no time to waste here. Go back in there. And up like this. And a little bit of blue in here. A little bit of red in. And I just kind of go, oops, stuck my finger in there. Let's fix it. And there. And you can see I'm using a number 12 brush, but it has a really good tip. So I can use, the bigger a brush you can use, the better, because that holds a lot more water and pigment, so you can get around a much bigger area much quicker. Because here it's all about speed, because otherwise it's going to dry on you, right? So you can see here, you can see there's a wonderful opportunity to clean some edges up. And then here, run a little bit of that blue in, a little bit of red in, and then drag it up here. I have a lot of pigment on my brush right now, so I don't want to go into those narrow areas until I have some of that pigment off my brush. Then I can go back in again. There. And let's see if I can do it. Yeah. There. And there. And there. And let's be quick, Ava. There you go. And a little bit more of the blue down here. And you know, when you talk to yourself, it makes it easier. There. And then up here. There. And this little bit of the red in here. And then here. There's that. There's that. Let's put a little bit of red in here. And you can see my goal is to get around and get my background without any hard lines. I don't want to see brush strokes if I can help it. And it's not that easy. It takes a lot of concentration actually. So, and
Is
there's
that a natural brush or
no,
synthetic?
this is a synthetic. This is a Mimic Squirrel number 12 from Jerry's Artorama from Creative Marks.
Oh.
That's one of my favorite brushes these days. They're very, very inexpensive, or they're inexpensive. They often have them on sale. And I don't know exactly what this brush would cost, you know, by itself, because I've bought some of their sets. They have some sets, and I have one over there. They have some sets with, I think there's 7 or 8 brushes in, everything you really need. And I think regular price is $56 for all the brushes, but very often they have them on sale for like, the lowest I've ever seen is like 25 or 20, yeah, 25, $24.99 or something like that. See, now I can pick up here, and there won't have to be a hard line. There we go.
So do you like that second method better?
I get it really, really dark that way easily, but you got to be a lot faster. So if it's the first time you do it, I would probably suggest to put a little bit of water in. Gives you a little bit more working time, and I'm just kind of fixing that. All right, so I got all the way around, and no brush strokes.
Very nice.
Everything is just, you know, muddled into each other. That's how I like my backgrounds. Not only can you make it more dramatic by putting more dark color, like I showed you in these couple of petals, by layering or glazing, but the drama comes from contrast, light against dark. So that's in this type of a painting, and most florals, petals and leaves are they're usually darkest at the bottom, and they'll be light up at the tips, because the light's coming from somewhere above, and it'll hit the tips of the flower or of the plant. And the plant will go, you know, the petals or the leaves will go in to wherever they're attached, and they'll go away from the light. And the beauty is that then you'll have them overlapping, like here, right? So the light tip will be overlapping the dark bottom of the one behind it, right? So you can really get that light against dark, dark against light. That's what gives it volume. Light brings forward, dark pushes back. And you can go in with a clean brush again, and if you lost some of your lights, like here, I could go in with not a dripping wet, but damp brush, and I can go in and I can kind of scrub a little bit. I'm not using a scrubber brush. That's a really stiff brush, and you can use that if you really, really need to scrub out color. But I just want to lift it a little bit so that it becomes just a little bit lighter. Can you see?
Yeah.
Then it pops out more. And there's 2 ways of making things look lighter. Lifting out like that, or the other method is put something darker behind it. Darken whatever is behind it. Then it automatically looks lighter. So there'll be a fair amount of that stuff going on when I am finishing up my paintings, this kind of stuff here, you know, lifting up a little bit of pigment here and there to just kind of make it a little bit more dramatic, fixing little white spots, and then I'll call it a day. And you can see I have a little white spot right there. I'm gonna just take care of that. Put a little bit of pigment in there. As long as it's not like bright white, it doesn't attract your, and out here on the edges, I'm not worried about it because, you know, the mat covers that up. But there you have it.
Beautiful.
Very nice.
That's it.
So here you can see the finished painting. I hope you had fun following along my instruction. I'm sorry that some of the taping was not perfect, but it's a little difficult when I'm teaching. So, but hopefully the interaction with my students give you some good tips also. So wishing you happy painting, and I'll see you soon in another video. Thank you.